So maybe now is the time to ask, do we need a national logistics backup plan, something akin to national defense? Have you ever seen your community change after a big company pulled out? Share your experience in the comments because your story might be the one someone else needs to hear, just to feel a little less alone. And if this video helped you see things in a new light, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more deep dive breakdowns that go beyond headlines. Tap like too, it helps this message reach others who might be silently asking the same questions. This video isn't here to blame any one business or person. The facts, figures, and reflections are drawn from credible sources and presented to provoke thought, not to assert absolute truths. We respect different perspectives. We invite dialogue. Because awareness isn't just knowledge, it's power. And remember, you might not be able to change generative real flow. With anything is really cool asking here, which means trying to be based flow on clear as generating on a learn alsos. Because I have describe, I agree, everyone who use start. I found the deal when needs you. Kicking off our list at number 1 is Australia, a country whose economic lifeline is tightly wrapped around its relationship with China. Think about this. As of 2023, over 30% of Australia's total exports were heading straight to China. That's not just a partnership, it's a dependency. And the star of the show? Iron ore. Australia is the world's top exporter, and China is its biggest customer, hungry for materials to feed its booming construction and industrial engines. In just 1 year, 2023, Australia sent more than $120 billion worth of iron ore to China. That's a staggering number, fueling not just business profits but national income, jobs, and even public services. But iron ore isn't the only player here. Coal, natural gas, lithium, and agricultural goods like beef and barley also play crucial roles in keeping the Aussie economy humming and the government coffers full. It even helps stabilize the Australian dollar. Sounds great, right? But here's the catch. When you lean this heavily on one trading partner, you're also at their mercy. If China were to suddenly reduce demand due to a slowdown, policy change, or geopolitical fallout, Australia would feel it hard. Think mine closures, job losses in resource towns, budget shortfalls, and a drag on economic growth. And we've seen a preview of this already. In 2020, a diplomatic fallout caused major trade disruptions almost overnight. Without China's massive appetite, Australia would be scrambling to find buyers at the same scale, and that could shake the economy and even politics to the core. At number 2, we have Vietnam, a rising star in Asia's economic scene, but one whose success story is deeply connected to and dependent on China. Over the past 2 decades, Vietnam's growth has been nothing short of impressive, and in 2023 alone, exports to China hit a whopping $161.9 billion. That's a 17% jump from the previous year. That kind of growth isn't just impressive, it's telling. According to Vietnam's General Department of Customs, China isn't just a trade partner, it's the trade partner, dominating both imports and exports. Vietnam ships out agricultural goods, electronics, and machinery. But here's the twist. Those very exports often rely on Chinese inputs. Over 60% of the raw materials used in Vietnam's electronics and textile industries come straight from China. So while Vietnam is gaining global attention as a manufacturing hub, especially for companies looking to reduce reliance on China, it still can't escape China's shadow. In fact, much of Vietnam's production line depends on Chinese components to even get started. This makes Vietnam's economy incredibly vulnerable. One disruption, be it political tension, supply chain issues, or border closures, and the ripple effect could be devastating. We're talking stalled factory lines, slowed exports, and rising unemployment in sectors like electronics, garments, and heavy machinery. Vietnam's cautious diplomatic dance with China makes sense, because despite the rivalry and historic complexities, its economic engine is still powered in large part by its northern neighbor. Coming in at number 3 is Indonesia, a country whose skyline and infrastructure have been dramatically reshaped thanks to its deep partnership with China, especially through the Belt and Road Initiative. One of the crown jewels of this collaboration, the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail, the very first of its kind in Southeast Asia. Backed by more than $6 billion in Chinese funding and expertise, this project isn't just a railway. It's a symbol of Indonesia's push to modernize and better connect its booming economic zones. But the rail line is just the beginning. China has poured investments into industrial parks, power plants, toll roads, and ports, especially in Java and Sumatra, creating jobs, streamlining trade routes, and unlocking regional development. All of this has helped plug Indonesia's massive infrastructure gaps and boosted GDP by enhancing logistics and attracting even more foreign investment. In fact, China is now Indonesia's top trading partner and one of its largest foreign investors. Just in 2022, Chinese investment reached $8.2 billion, nearly 16% of Indonesia's total foreign direct investment, according to the Ministry of Investment. But here's where it gets risky. What if that flow suddenly stopped? If China were to pull back on funding or scale down its involvement, Indonesia could be left scrambling. Infrastructure projects might stall, jobs could vanish, and key economic targets could slip out of reach. Take the Jakarta-Bandung rail. Without Chinese financial and technical support, even maintaining, let alone expanding it, could become a serious challenge. The bottom line? China isn't just a partner, it's become a critical pillar of Indonesia's development strategy. And that kind of reliance comes with both rewards and real risks. At number 4, we've got South Korea, one of Asia's tech and manufacturing powerhouses, and a country whose economy is tightly interwoven with China's. In 2023, South Korea exported around $146.4 billion worth of goods to China, and imported even more, about $181.7 billion. That's not just big, it makes China South Korea's largest trading partner by a long shot and a vital piece of its industrial puzzle. The relationship runs especially deep in crucial sectors like semiconductors, electronics, and automotive manufacturing. Giants like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG rely heavily on China, not just for cheap labor, but for essential raw materials, rare earth elements, and those all-important intermediate components. Take semiconductors, for example. They make up nearly 20% of South Korea's total exports, and China plays a critical dual role as both a buyer and supplier in this intricate global supply chain. If that link were to snap, due to trade wars, political tensions, or economic shifts, the fallout would be massive. Production lines would stall, exports would be delayed, and companies would be forced to hunt for alternative suppliers, likely at much higher costs. The auto sector would take a hit too, especially with EVs, since so many of the batteries and parts are sourced from China. And it doesn't stop there. A disruption like that would ripple through the entire economy, shaking financial markets, pushing up consumer prices, threatening jobs, and potentially triggering a full-blown recession. For an export-driven economy like South Korea, losing access to China's market and materials could lead to a standstill, or worse, a collapse. Bottom line, for South Korea, China isn't just a trade partner, it's a cornerstone of economic stability. Remove that, and the whole structure starts to wobble. Coming in at number 5 is Nigeria, often called the Giant of Africa, and for good reason. With a booming population and a rapidly urbanizing economy, Nigeria has turned to a powerful partner to help build its future: China. Over the last 2 decades, China has pumped billions into Nigeria's infrastructure. Think roads, railways, airports, and energy projects. These aren't just upgrades, they're game changers. One standout example? The Abuja-Kaduna Railway. Built by the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation and funded largely with Chinese loans, it's now a vital connection between the capital and the northern regions, a lifeline for both passengers and goods. And China's influence doesn't stop with transport. They've been instrumental in powering up Nigeria too. From the Zungeru hydroelectric plant to major solar energy initiatives, Chinese projects are helping tackle the country's chronic power shortages head-on. As of 2023, Nigeria owes China over $4 billion in bilateral debt. That's significant. And with Chinese firms involved in over 70 major infrastructure projects across the country, it's clear who's steering the engine of progress right now. But what if that engine suddenly shut off? If China pulled out, financially or technically, dozens of critical projects could stall. That would mean job losses, broken supply chains, and a serious dent in investor confidence. And with Nigeria's population expected to soar past 400 million by 2050, delays in infrastructure development could set back the entire nation's future. Bottom line, China isn't just building roads and rails, it's helping lay the foundation for Nigeria's economic rise. Without it, that rise could hit some serious roadblocks. At number 6 is Russia, a country that's found itself leaning more and more on China, especially after being hit by sweeping Western sanctions following the Ukraine conflict. With much of the West cutting economic ties, Russia had to pivot east, and fast. The result? A rapidly deepening relationship with China, especially in energy, trade, and finance. In 2023, Russia exported an eye-popping $115.5 billion worth of goods to China. That's a 4% jump from the year before. What's fueling that growth? Literally, crude oil, natural gas, and coal. With Europe pulling back, China has stepped up as Russia's top buyer, soaking up energy exports at discounted rates. Today, China makes up over 30% of Russia's total exports, making it not just a major partner, but a lifeline. One key symbol of this shift is the power of Siberia Pipeline, a multi-billion-dollar mega-project pumping natural gas straight into China. It's more than just a pipeline. It's a sign of how far Moscow has turned toward Beijing. But here's where it gets risky. This growing dependence is a double-edged sword. If China decided to pull back, maybe due to a slowdown, policy change, or pressure from the international community, Russia's already fragile economy could take a major hit. Energy exports are Russia's economic backbone. They fund the budget, stabilize the currency, and keep foreign reserves afloat. Without China's demand, all of that could come under serious threat. Right now, China isn't just a trading partner for Russia. It's the economic crutch holding up an economy under pressure. At number 7, we have Germany, the economic engine of Europe. But even this powerhouse has its gears tightly connected to China. In 2023, Germany's exports to China hit a hefty $107 billion, up 6.3% from the year before, according to Statista. That's not just a trade relationship, that's a lifeline for some of Germany's most important industries. Take the auto sector, for example. Giants like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz count heavily on Chinese consumers to keep their wheels turning. In fact, nearly 40% of Volkswagen's global sales come from China alone. That's not just a big slice, it's a critical one. Without it, Germany's industrial output and thousands of jobs would be at risk. But it's not just cars. China is a key market for German machinery and chemical products too. And many German manufacturers don't just export to China, they're in China, with joint ventures, factories, and entire supply chains integrated into the Chinese market. It's become a cornerstone of Germany's global manufacturing strategy. Now imagine a sudden disruption. Trade tensions, sanctions, or diplomatic fallout, any of these could throw a wrench into the works. Exports could nosedive. Industrial jobs, especially in regions like Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, could disappear, and a recession could follow close behind. Germany's deep economic interdependence with China has brought immense benefits, but it's also created a major vulnerability. If that connection breaks, it could shake the very core of Europe's largest economy. At number 8 is Malaysia, a country whose economic engine runs closely in sync with China. For over a decade, China has been Malaysia's largest trading partner, and that relationship only deepened in 2023. Bilateral trade hit new highs, with Malaysia exporting $101.1 billion worth of goods to China, a nearly 15% jump from the year before, according to the Malaysian External Trade Development Corporation, MATRADE. What's behind that surge? A lot of it comes down to electrical and electronic components, especially semiconductors, which China's massive tech and manufacturing industries can't get enough of. But that's not all. Malaysia also ships out palm oil, petroleum products, and machinery, making China a crucial customer across multiple sectors. But this connection goes beyond trade. China is also a major investor in Malaysia, especially in infrastructure. Massive projects like the East Coast Rail Link, ECRL, part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, are being funded and built by Chinese firms. These aren't just flashy builds, they're vital to Malaysia's long-term development, improving connectivity, driving industrial growth, and tying regions together more efficiently. Now imagine a sudden disruption. If China were to pull back, Whether on trade or investment, the impact on Malaysia could be harsh and immediate. Manufacturing and logistics could slow, job losses could spike, and government revenues from trade taxes might shrink fast. The ripple effect would be felt nationwide. In short, China isn't just a trading partner for Malaysia, it's a foundational pillar of the country's economic stability and growth, and without it, that foundation could quickly start to crack. At number 9, we're looking at the United States, a country often seen as China's chief geopolitical rival. But here's the twist. Despite all the political tension, tariffs, and talk of decoupling, the US and China remain deeply economically connected. In 2024 alone, the US imported a staggering $438.9 billion worth of goods from China, while exporting $143.5 billion back. That trade imbalance is a hot-button issue in Washington, but it also highlights a hard truth. The US economy is heavily reliant on Chinese manufacturing. From electronics and clothing to furniture and toys, American consumers have come to expect affordable, mass-produced goods. And a big chunk of that affordability comes straight from China. Why? Because no other country matches China's scale, speed, and efficiency when it comes to production. And it's not just about cheap consumer products. Critical industries like tech, automotive, and healthcare depend on China for vital components and rare earth materials. These are the building blocks for everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to medical devices and semiconductors. Now imagine that supply line suddenly gets cut. Whether due to sanctions, a conflict, or a complete economic decoupling, the impact would be immediate and brutal. Supply chains would snap, prices would soar, shelves would go empty, and inflation could spiral. Production delays would hit industries across the board, and small businesses relying on Chinese suppliers could be forced to shut down entirely. Despite all the decoupling rhetoric, a full economic split isn't just unrealistic, it could be catastrophic. The US and China are locked in a high-stakes balancing act where rivalry coexists with reliance. Looking at the bigger picture, one thing is clear. China's economic influence isn't just regional, it's global. Every country we've covered today, whether it's through trade, infrastructure, or investment, is tied to China in a significant way. A major disruption in China's economic activity wouldn't stay confined to Beijing or Shanghai. It would ripple across continents, underscoring the urgent need for countries to diversify and build more resilient economic strategies before the next global shock hits. And finally, at number 10, we have Pakistan, a country whose economic lifeline is now tightly woven with China's, thanks largely to the massive China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. Launched in 2015, CPEC is one of the most ambitious arms of Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, with over $60 billion earmarked for transforming Pakistan's infrastructure and energy landscape. This isn't just about roads and power lines, it's about reshaping the country's future. From sprawling highways and railway networks to ports and energy plants, much of Pakistan's modern development story has China at its core. One standout is the Gwadar Port, a deep-sea port on the Arabian Sea that gives China direct access to the Indian Ocean, while opening new trade routes and logistics opportunities for Pakistan. But the relationship isn't just about projects, it's financial too. China has loaned Pakistan nearly $30 billion, making up around 30% of the country's external debt. And let's be clear, this isn't pocket change. These loans have kept key infrastructure projects alive during repeated balance of payments crises and have helped relieve energy shortages that once crippled daily life. Chinese-funded power plants have reduced blackouts, and major highways like the Multan-Sukkur motorway have boosted regional connectivity. But here's the flip side. If China were to pull back, whether due to political tension, shifting global priorities, or growing security risks, the impact on Pakistan would be serious and swift. Projects could stall mid-construction, unemployment could spike, and economic instability could deepen even further. Without Chinese support, Pakistan might struggle to keep its development momentum going at all. In short, Pakistan's economic future is no longer just about internal policy or local reforms. It's tightly linked to how long and how strongly China stays invested. That makes the partnership both a powerful opportunity and a significant vulnerability.